Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon and watched the stars bend around them as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The year was 2387, and humanity had been exploring space for over 200 years now. Jake had seen many strange things in his 20 years as a ship captain, but today would be different from all the others. The Horizon was humanity's newest exploration ship, and Jake felt proud to command her. His crew of 300 people came from all over Earth and the colonies. They had been traveling for 6 months looking for new worlds where humans could live. The mission seemed simple enough until the sensors started screaming warnings. Lisa. Brooks ran onto the bridge holding a datapad in her hands. She was the ship's diplomatic officer and one of the smartest people Jake knew. Her face looked worried as she showed him the readings. Something big was coming toward them, and it was not human. The main screen lit up with an image that made everyone on the bridge stop talking. A massive ship appeared in front of them. It was 3 times bigger than the Horizon and looked like it was made from black metal and crystal. Strange lights moved across its surface like living things. Jake had never seen anything like it. More ships appeared around the first one, then more. Soon there were 20 alien ships surrounding the Horizon. Jake felt his heart beating fast, but he kept his voice calm when he spoke to his crew. They needed to stay ready for anything. A voice came through the communication system. It sounded like metal scraping against stone. The words were in English, but the accent was unlike anything humans had heard before. The alien speaker called itself Overseer Zixthak of the Catharan Empire. Lisa stepped forward to handle the first contact. She had trained for this moment her whole life. The alien voice told them that humans were now subjects of the Catharan Empire. All human ships must return to their worlds and wait for further orders. No humans could travel in space without permission from the Catharans. Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but Lisa kept talking calmly to the aliens. She explained that humans were peaceful explorers who wanted to be friends with other species. The Catharans could work together with humans instead of trying to control them. Overseer Zixthak made a sound that might have been laughing. The aliens said that humans were young and foolish like children. The Catharan Empire had ruled this part of space for thousands of years. They knew what was best for primitive species like humans. The conversation went on for hours, but the Catharans would not change their minds. They saw humans as just another weak species that needed to be controlled. Jake started to understand that these aliens thought they were better than everyone else. When the talks ended, the alien ships moved away, but they did not leave. The Catharans told Jake to take his ship back to human space and deliver their message to Earth. All human colonies must prepare to accept Catharan rule or face the consequences. Jake looked at Lisa and saw the same anger in her eyes that he felt. Humans had fought too hard for their freedom to give it up now. They would take the message back to Earth, but Jake knew what the answer would be. Humans would never bow down to alien masters. The journey back to human space took 3 weeks. When they reached the border colony of New Haven, Jake found that the Catharans had already been there. The colonists were angry and scared. The aliens had landed troops and told the humans to pack their belongings. They would be moved to a different world where the Catharans could watch them better. The colonists refused to leave. New Haven was their home, and they had worked hard to build their farms and cities there. The Catharans gave them 10 days to change their minds, or they would use force to move them. Jake sent messages to Earth asking for help, but it would take weeks to get an answer. The colonists could not wait that long. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Park arrived with 5 human warships to protect New Haven. Ryan was young, but he had studied alien technology and tactics at the military academy. The Catharans came back with 15 ships ready for battle. They thought the humans would run away when they saw how outnumbered they were. But Ryan had other plans. He knew that human ships were smaller and faster than the alien vessels. He could use that advantage if he was smart about it. The battle began when the Catharan ships tried to land more troops on New Haven. Ryan's ships attacked them from different directions using hit-and-run tactics. The aliens had never fought enemies who moved so fast and changed plans so quickly. The humans lost 3 ships, but they destroyed 7 Catharan vessels before the aliens retreated. The surviving Catharans seemed shocked that such a small human force had fought so well. They had expected an easy victory but found a real fight instead. News of the battle spread quickly through both human and alien space. The Catharan High Command could not believe that any species had successfully fought their forces. For centuries, no one had dared to resist them. Now these strange humans had proven it could be done. On Earth, the government knew that war was coming. Admiral Helen Torres received orders to prepare the human fleet for the biggest fight in their history. The Catharans would come with everything they had, and humans needed to be ready. Jake Morrison looked at the reports coming in from across human space. More Catharan fleets were moving toward human colonies. The aliens were angry now and wanted to show everyone what happened to species that defied them. The first shots had been fired and there was no turning back. The age of human independence in space was about to be tested like never before. 6 months had passed since the first battle at New Haven, and humanity was losing the war. The Catharan fleets came like a dark storm across human space. Their ships were bigger and stronger than anything humans had built. Their weapons could destroy a human ship with just a few shots. Every week brought news of another colony falling to the alien invaders. General Marcus Cole stood in the command center on Luna Base and watched the tactical display with growing worry. Red markers showed Catharan forces advancing on dozens of human worlds. Blue markers showed human ships retreating or destroyed. The aliens were winning and everyone knew it. Marcus had been fighting wars for 30 years, but this was different from anything he had faced before. The Catharans fought with perfect coordination. Their fleets moved like clockwork and their tactics never changed. They would surround a human world and demand surrender. If the humans refused, the aliens would destroy everything from orbit. The human fleet was brave, but they were not strong enough. Earth had only been building warships for 50 years while the Catharans had been perfecting their military for thousands. Human ships were fast, but their weapons barely scratched the alien armor. The aliens could repair damage quickly while human ships had to retreat after taking even small hits. Dr. Amy Chen worked day and night in her laboratory studying captured Catharan technology. She had been a scientist who studied alien life forms, but now she was trying to find ways to fight them. Amy had discovered something important about the Catharans that might help humanity survive. The aliens were very smart, but they thought in straight lines. They made plans and followed them exactly without changing anything. When something unexpected happened, they took time to make new orders from their commanders. This gave humans a small advantage if they could use it right. Amy brought her findings to Marcus and explained her idea. Humans needed to stop fighting like the Catharans expected them to. Instead of big fleet battles, they should use small groups that could attack and disappear quickly. Hit the aliens where they were weak and run before they could respond. Marcus listened carefully to Amy's plan. It was dangerous and many human pilots would die, but it might be their only chance. He called Captain Steve Johnson to lead the first experimental mission. Steve was known for taking risks and thinking fast when plans went wrong. Steve took 12 small ships and attacked a Catharan supply convoy near the Centauri system. Instead of fighting the escort ships directly, he targeted the cargo vessels carrying fuel and spare parts. The Catharan escorts tried to protect the convoy, but Steve's ships were too fast and spread out too far. The humans destroyed half the supply ships before the Catharans could organize a proper response. When alien reinforcements arrived, Steve's ships were already gone. The attack had taken less than 20 minutes, but it left the Catharan fleet in that sector without supplies for weeks. More raids followed Steve's success. Human ships would appear from nowhere and hit Catharan bases, then disappear before help could arrive. The aliens started keeping more ships to guard their supply lines, but that meant fewer ships attacking human colonies. Engineer Paula Davis worked with captured alien equipment to build new weapons for human ships. She could not make anything as advanced as Catharan technology, but she could combine human and alien parts in ways that confused the enemy. Her hybrid weapons were unpredictable, but they worked. The first real test of the new tactics came at Titan Station. The space station orbited Saturn and controlled shipping lanes to the outer colonies. If the Catharans captured it, they could cut off supplies to dozens of human worlds. Commander Nick Thompson commanded the station with only 800 defenders. The Catharan attack force had 30 ships and 5,000 soldiers. They expected to take the station in a few hours. Nick had other plans. He used mining charges from the asteroid belt to create a minefield around Titan Station. When the alien ships tried to dock, they triggered massive explosions. The Catharans sent assault troops through the damaged sections of the station, but Nick was ready for them. His people had turned the station into a maze of deadly traps. Every corridor had hidden weapons. Every room could become a battleground. The aliens found themselves fighting enemies who knew every inch of their home. The battle for Titan Station lasted 3 days. The Catharans kept sending more troops, but they could not advance through the station. Nick's defenders used every trick they could think of. They dropped heavy equipment on alien soldiers. They vented atmosphere to freeze attackers. They even used the station's artificial gravity against the invaders. When the fighting ended, the Catharans had lost over 2,000 soldiers and 6 ships. Nick still controlled Titan Station with less than 300 survivors. The victory proved that humans could win against impossible odds if they fought smart instead of fair. News of the victory at Titan Station spread through human space like wildfire. For the first time since the war began, people had hope that they could survive. More importantly, the victory showed other species that the mighty Catharan Empire could be defeated. The aliens tried to understand how humans could fight so differently from everyone else. Catharan commanders studied human tactics, but they could not predict what humans would do next. Every time the aliens thought they understood human strategy, the humans would change everything and try something completely different. Marcus Cole received reports from spies in alien space. The Catharans were having problems with their own military. Young alien officers were asking questions about why they were fighting humans. Some alien worlds were starting to wonder if the Empire was as strong as it claimed to be, but the war was far from over. The Catharan High Command was angry about their losses and wanted to end the human resistance quickly. They started using weapons that could destroy entire cities from orbit. Civilian populations were targeted to break human morale. The escalation horrified other alien species who had been watching the war from a distance. Many aliens had feared the Catharan Empire for centuries, but had never dared to oppose them. Now they saw humans standing up to the same bullies who had threatened everyone for so long. Amy Chen worked on her next breakthrough in a secret laboratory on Mars. She believed that humans could do more than just survive this war. If they were smart and brave enough, they might actually win it. But first, they needed allies, and Amy thought she knew where to find them. The war had been raging for over a year when the first secret message arrived. It came through old trade routes that most people had forgotten about. The message was written in broken English, but the meaning was clear. Other alien species wanted to meet with humans to talk about the Catharan problem. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez read the message 3 times before she believed it was real. Elena had spent her career studying alien cultures and languages. She knew that many species feared the Catharan Empire, but none had ever dared to oppose them openly. Now it seemed that human resistance was giving other aliens courage to act. The meeting took place in neutral space near an old mining station that had been abandoned for decades. Elena traveled there in a small ship with minimal escorts. She did not know what to expect, but she knew this might be humanity's only chance to find allies. The first aliens Elena met were from the Valian Federation. They looked like large dolphins that could walk on land, and their ships were filled with water instead of air. The Valians had watched the Catharan Empire grow stronger for centuries, while their own federation grew weaker. They were tired of living in fear. Admiral Kethvar of the Valian Navy explained that his people controlled important shipping lanes that the Catharans needed for their war effort. If the Valians closed those routes, it would hurt the Catharan supply lines badly. But the Valians were not strong enough to fight the Empire alone. They needed human help to make their rebellion work. Elena promised that humans would share their new fighting tactics with the Valians. In return, the Valians would provide safe passage for human ships and share their advanced sensor technology. The alliance was small, but it was a start. More aliens came to secret meetings over the following months. The Skorath Republic sent representatives who looked like giant lizards with scales that changed color when they talked. The Skoraths had been neutral in most conflicts, but they were worried about Catharan expansion toward their territory. Captain Barry Wells led covert missions to establish supply lines through Skorath space. Barry had been a smuggler before the war. and he knew how to move ships without being detected. The Skoraths helped him set up hidden bases where human ships could refuel and repair between missions. The most surprising contact came from inside Catharan space itself. A group of young Catharan officers led by a warrior named Catharan had been watching human tactics with great interest. They were fascinated by how humans could adapt so quickly to new situations. Catharan and his followers believed that the Catharan Empire had become too rigid and predictable. They thought their own species could learn from human creativity and flexibility. These rebel Catharans began secretly helping human forces by providing intelligence about enemy movements and weaknesses. Colonel Sandy Mitchell coordinated the growing network of alien allies and rebel contacts. Sandy had been an intelligence officer before the war, and she understood the value of good information. The data from alien sources helped human forces avoid Catharan traps and find targets that would hurt the enemy most. The Alliance faced many challenges in its early days. Different alien species had trouble understanding each other. Their technologies were not compatible, and their fighting styles were completely different. Some aliens wanted to make direct attacks, while others preferred to work from the shadows. Elena spent months traveling between different alien worlds trying to build trust and cooperation. She learned basic words in dozens of alien languages and studied their customs to avoid giving offense. Slowly, the various species began to work together despite their differences. The first joint operation took place in the Rigel system, where a major Catharan supply depot was located. Human ships provided the speed and unpredictability, while Valian forces used their sensors to guide the attack. Skorath heavy cruisers gave the firepower needed to destroy the depot's defenses. The attack succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. The combined fleet destroyed not just the supply depot, but also a squadron of Catharan warships that had been refueling there. More importantly, the aliens learned that they could trust each other in battle. News of the Alliance spread through both free and occupied territories. Species that had been neutral began to reconsider their positions. The Catharan Empire had seemed invincible for so long that many aliens had given up hope of freedom. Now they saw that resistance was possible. The ethereal collective had remained, isolated from galactic politics for over 1,000 years. These ancient aliens lived in the galactic core and rarely contacted younger species. But reports of Catharan atrocities against civilian populations finally moved them to action. The Ethereals sent advisors to help the growing alliance. With ethereal guidance, the alliance became more organized and effective. The ancient aliens shared knowledge about Catharan history and psychology that helped explain why the Empire was so rigid. They also provided technology that could disrupt Catharan communications and sensors. Catharan met with human officers in secret locations throughout the war zone. The rebel Catharan had become convinced that his species needed to change or they would eventually destroy themselves. He believed that contact with humans and other free species could help the Catharans evolve beyond their current limitations. The intelligence provided by Catharan and his followers was invaluable. They revealed the locations of hidden Catharan bases and warned about planned attacks on Alliance worlds. Most importantly, they confirmed that the Catharan High Command was becoming increasingly desperate as the war dragged on. Other Catharan worlds began to question why they were fighting this war. The Empire had told them that humans were dangerous, primitives who threatened galactic order. But the evidence showed that humans were trying to defend their homes and were willing to share their knowledge with other species. Some Catharan colonies started to rebel against the central government. They refused to send more soldiers or resources to support the war. The Empire's response was swift and brutal. Rebel colonies were bombed from orbit as examples to others. The harsh crackdown on their own people shocked many Catharans who had believed their government was just and honorable. More aliens began to join Catharan's movement, or at least refused to actively support the war effort. Elena received reports that neutral species throughout the galaxy were forming their own alliance to protect themselves from Catharan aggression. The war that had started as humanity's desperate fight for survival was becoming a galaxy-wide movement for freedom from imperial domination. The Free Worlds Coalition held its first formal council meeting on a remote planet far from Catharan, Space Representatives from 20 different species gathered to plan their strategy for the next phase of the war. Elena looked around the meeting room and realized that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer fighting alone against impossible odds. They had become the leaders of a galactic revolution. 3 years had passed since the first shots were fired at New Haven, and the war had changed completely. What started as humanity's desperate fight for survival had grown into the largest conflict the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Kate Morrison stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched hundreds of ships from dozens of different species moving in perfect formation toward their target. Kate was Jake Morrison's daughter, and she had inherited her father's courage and quick thinking. The fleet under her command was the largest military force humans had ever assembled. Alongside human vessels flew Valian bioships that looked like giant sea creatures swimming through space. Skorath dreadnoughts bristled with heavy weapons while ethereal craft moved like silver ghosts between the other ships. The Free Worlds Coalition had grown stronger every month as more species joined the fight against Catharan tyranny. But the Catharans were still dangerous enemies with thousands of years of military experience. They controlled the most advanced technology in the galaxy, and their core worlds were protected by massive defensive systems. General Alex Turner had spent months planning Operation Breakpoint with representatives from all the allied species. Alex understood that the coalition could not win through direct attacks on heavily defended Catharan strongholds. Instead, they needed to strike at the Empire's weakest point, which was its need for central control and coordination. The Catharan Empire was spread across hundreds of star systems, but everything was controlled from a few administrative centers. If those centers could be captured or destroyed, the rest of the Empire would be paralyzed while local commanders waited for new orders from their superiors. The first phase of Operation Breakpoint targeted the communication networks that held the Empire together. Teams of specialists from different species worked together to plant viruses in Catharan computer systems and destroy the relay stations that carried messages between distant fleets. Lieutenant Colonel Greg Stevens led elite strike teams in attacks that seemed impossible to anyone who thought like a Catharan. His forces would appear inside enemy bases using captured Catharan technology to fool the security systems. They would complete their missions and disappear before the defenders understood what was happening. The Catharans had never faced enemies who combined careful planning with the ability to change tactics instantly when something went wrong. Their rigid command structure could not adapt quickly enough to counter the coalition's flexible approach to warfare. Within weeks, the Catharan military machine began to break down. Fleet commanders found themselves cut off from higher authority and had to make decisions on their own. This was something most Catharans were not trained to do. They preferred to follow orders rather than think for themselves. Some Catharan forces continued to fight effectively, but others became confused and made terrible mistakes. Ships that should have been protecting supply convoys were sent to attack empty space because their orders were based on outdated information. Entire fleets arrived at battle zones days after the fighting had ended. Catharan used the chaos to expand his rebellion within Catharan space. More alien worlds joined his movement as they saw that the central government could no longer protect them or even give them coherent orders. The empire that had seemed so strong and unified was falling apart from within. The second phase of Operation Breakpoint began when coalition forces launched coordinated attacks on 12 different Catharan administrative centers. The aliens had never faced simultaneous assaults on so many targets, and they could not decide which ones to defend first. Captain Holly Davis commanded the assault on the Catharan regional capital at Vega Prime. Her mixed fleet of human and alien ships had to fight through 3 defensive lines before reaching the planet itself. The battle in orbit lasted for 6 hours, but the coalition forces eventually broke through. The real challenge came when Marine Colonel Pete Rogers led ground forces into the crystal cities of Vega Prime. Fighting in urban areas had always been difficult, but Catharan cities were unlike anything humans had encountered before. The buildings were grown rather than built, and they could change their internal structure to trap invaders. Pete's Marines adapted quickly to the strange environment. They learned to use the aliens' own technology against them. When Catharan defenders tried to seal off corridors, the humans found ways to break through the crystal walls. When the buildings tried to confuse them with shifting layouts, the Marines marked their paths with human equipment. The Catharans fought bravely to defend their cities, but they could not match the creativity and determination of their enemies. The coalition forces seemed to find solutions to every problem the defenders could create. After days of fighting, the surviving Catharans began to surrender rather than face complete destruction. Similar scenes played out on worlds throughout Catharan space. The Empire's military commanders found themselves unable to coordinate their defenses against enemies who attacked from multiple directions using tactics that changed constantly. The decisive moment came when Catharan contacted Admiral Kate Morrison with an offer of alliance. The rebel Catharan had gathered a significant force of his own people who were willing to fight against their former government. He proposed a joint assault on Cathara Prime itself. The Catharan homeworld was the most heavily defended planet in the galaxy. No enemy had ever successfully attacked it in over 2,000 years. The planet was surrounded by automated defense platforms and protected by the elite units of the Catharan military. Kate Morrison knew that attacking the homeworld would be extremely dangerous, but she also understood the symbolic importance of such a victory. If the coalition could capture or destroy the center of Catharan power, it would prove to everyone in the galaxy that the old order was truly finished. The final battle of the war began when over 1,000 coalition ships dropped out of faster than light travel at the edge of the Cathara system. The Catharan defenders had been expecting an attack, but they were stunned by the size of the enemy force. The space battle around Cathara Prime lasted for 2 full days. Both sides threw everything they had into the fight. Massive Catharan battle stations traded fire with coalition dreadnoughts, while fighters from dozens of species dueled among the orbital platforms. The turning point came when Catharan's ships joined the battle on the coalition side. The rebel Catharans knew exactly how to disable the defensive systems that protected their homeworld. When the automated platforms went offline, the coalition fleet was able to reach the planet's surface. The ground assault on Cathara Prime was led by troops from all the allied species working together. Human marines fought alongside Valian warriors, and Skorath heavy infantry. Even some ethereals left their ships to join the battle against tyranny. The fighting in the Catharan capital was fierce but brief. The defenders were outnumbered and cut off from reinforcements. When the main government complex fell to coalition forces, the surviving Catharan leaders realized that their empire was finished. Catharan personally negotiated the surrender of the Catharan High Command. The old leaders were given a choice between exile or execution for their war crimes. Most chose exile, while a few decided to stay and help rebuild their shattered civilization. The news of victory spread through coalition space and beyond. Species that had lived in fear of the Catharan Empire for centuries finally felt safe. The galaxy's oldest and most oppressive government had been defeated by an alliance of free peoples who refused to accept domination. 50 years had passed since the end of the First Human War, and Ambassador Carl Thompson stood before the Galactic Council, preparing to give his final speech as humanity's representative. Carl was the son of Nick Thompson, who had defended Titan, stationed during the darkest days of the war. Like his father, Carl had dedicated his life to protecting the freedom that so many had died to achieve. The council chamber was filled with beings from over 200 different species. Some were descendants of the original coalition members, while others came from worlds that had gained their independence after the Catharan Empire fell. The galaxy had become a very different place since humans first encountered the Catharans. All those years ago, Carl looked out at the assembled delegates and remembered the stories his father had told him about the war. Back then, most species lived in fear of alien domination. Now they worked together as equals to solve problems that affected everyone. The change had not happened overnight, but the seeds of cooperation planted during the war had grown into something beautiful. Dr. Janet Wilson sat in the observer section taking notes for her historical research. Janet had spent the last 20 years studying how the war had changed galactic civilization. Her work showed that human ideas about individual freedom and creative thinking had spread to species throughout known space. Before the war, most alien societies were organized like the old Catharan Empire, with rigid hierarchies and unchanging traditions. Contact with humans had introduced new concepts about democracy and innovation. Many species had reformed their governments to give more power to ordinary citizens. The economic changes had been just as dramatic as the political ones. Trade between different species had increased 100-fold as former enemies became business partners. New technologies developed through cooperation between human and alien scientists had improved life for everyone. The Valian Federation had used human manufacturing techniques to build underwater cities that were marvels of engineering. The Skorath Republic had combined their metallurgy with human computer systems to create materials that were stronger and lighter than anything previously known. Even the former Catharan worlds had benefited from the changes. Without the burden of supporting a massive military empire, they had been able to focus on peaceful development. Many of the crystal cities damaged during the war had been rebuilt as centers of art and learning. Ketherhan had become the elected leader of the Ketharan Democratic Union. The old warrior was now in his final years, but he still spoke passionately about the lessons his people had learned from their defeat. He often said that losing the war was the best thing that had ever happened to Ketharan civilization. The former empire had broken up into dozens of smaller governments that were more responsive to their citizens' needs. Some Ketharan worlds had become major centers of scientific research while others focused on philosophy and art. The rigid conformity of the imperial era had given way to a flowering of creativity and individual expression. Carl's speech that day was about the importance of maintaining the institutions that had kept the peace for 50 years. The Galactic Council itself was a human innovation created to prevent any single species from dominating others. Every member had an equal voice regardless of their military or economic power. The Free Trade Alliance ensured that all species could benefit from interstellar commerce. The Cultural Exchange Program allowed young beings from different worlds to study together and learn from each other. The Mutual Defense Pact guaranteed that no species would have to face aggression alone. These institutions had not prevented all conflicts, but they had made major wars almost impossible. Disputes between species were now settled through negotiation and compromise rather than military action. The galaxy was not perfect, but it was more peaceful than it had been in centuries. As Carl finished his speech, he thought about all the people who had sacrificed to make this moment possible. Jake Morrison, who had made first contact with the Catharans; Ryan Park, who had won the first battle; Nick Thompson, who had held Titan Station; Lisa Brooks, who had tried to find peace even when war seemed inevitable. Many of the war's heroes were gone now, but their children and grandchildren carried on their work. Kate Morrison had become the head of the Galactic Security Force. Barry Wells had established the largest shipping company in known space. Amy Chen's daughter was leading research into new forms of interstellar travel. The memorial ceremony that evening brought together veterans from all the species that had fought in the war. Old enemies shared stories and laughed together as their grandchildren played nearby. The young ones barely understood that their grandparents had once tried to kill each other. Ketherhan gave the final speech of the ceremony. He spoke about how the war had taught both sides that cooperation was stronger than domination. The Catharans had thought they were superior to other species, but the war proved that diversity was a source of strength rather than weakness. The old Catharan looked directly at Carl as he spoke about the future. The younger generation would face new challenges that required the same creativity and cooperation that had won the war. They could not become complacent or assume that peace would maintain itself without effort. After the ceremony, Carl walked through the memorial garden where monuments honored those who had died in the war. Each species had contributed something to the design, creating a unique blend of artistic styles. Human names were carved alongside Valian script and Skorath pictograms. A group of children from the local schools had gathered around the central fountain. They came from a dozen different species, but they played together without thinking about their differences. Their teachers were explaining the history of the war and why it was important to remember. One young human girl asked why the aliens had wanted to fight in the first place. Her teacher explained that the Catharans had been afraid of change and thought they could prevent it through force. The war had shown everyone that change was inevitable, and it was better to guide it than resist it. As the evening ended, Carl received a message from his niece Amy Morrison, who had just taken command of her first exploration ship. She was leading a mission to uncharted space beyond the old war zones. Her crew included beings from 8 different species working together to discover new worlds. Amy's message reminded Carl of his grandfather, Jake, who had commanded the Horizon during that first fateful encounter with the Catharans. The Morrison family had been exploring space for generations, and they would continue to do so. But now they explored as part of a galactic community rather than alone. The final entry in Dr. Wilson's research notes captured the essence of what the war had accomplished. Humanity had not just survived their encounter with a hostile alien empire. They had transformed an entire galaxy by proving that freedom and cooperation could triumph over tyranny and fear. The echoes of the first human war continued to shape civilization 50 years later. Children of former enemies grew up as friends. Technologies developed during the conflict now served peaceful purposes. Most importantly, the ideals that humans had fought for had become the foundation of galactic society. As Carl looked up at the stars from the memorial garden, he felt proud of what his people had achieved. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders waiting to be discovered. Thanks to the sacrifices of the previous generation, those discoveries would be shared by all the free peoples of known space working together toward a better future.